Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us. Super excited for Earth Month to be talking with our friends at other organizations about what we do in this moment to capitalize on the momentum that climate justice organizations and environmental organizations have built over the last several decades to reach this really critical moment, especially in the United States, where we have seen the largest investment to tackle the climate crisis, not just in our country, but of any single country on the planet, and where we go from here, and continue to build off of that momentum of what we're building. So my name is Cristina Sensun Ramirez, and I'm the president of NextGen America. And this is actually also our organization's 10-year anniversary. And 10 years ago when we were founded with the idea that if we could organize and mobilize young people to scale, we could get elected officials to tackle the climate crisis. And 10 years ago when we were launched, a political pundit said, young people will not turn out, it's a waste of money, and politicians aren't going to do anything on the climate crisis at scale. And it's now 10 years later, and we've had the 3 highest youth voter turnouts in American history. Young people care as one of their top issues on the climate crisis because of the world that we're going to inherit. And now we've had the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which we're going to dig in and talk about a little bit more, that is the single largest investment by any country on the planet to tackle the climate crisis. So I hope those political pundits are eating crow now, because young people have proven just how powerful they are, and also that it's our job to push and make government respond to crises, and for us not to just accept the status quo or the political, or what people say is the political reality, but actually make government responsive to the challenges we face. So out of great challenge and great crisis also comes great opportunity. So I'm really excited to dig in with folks. We have an amazing panel of leaders and organizations that I really admire. So I would just love to start out with our friends at Rewiring America to talk a little bit about your organization, Rahul, and what you do. And also, hello, the Climate Corps just got announced about how people can start applying, which we'll talk about a little bit today. But people may be also wondering how you all got into this line of work, that may want to be having a career path and a job where they feel like they have a purpose, where they're saving their planet, where they can be really proud of what they do every day. So share a little bit about how you got into this work as well, beyond what your organization does and your fancy title.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. And hi, everyone. I am Rahul Young. I am the Director of Local Engagement here at Rewiring America. And Rewiring America is a nonprofit founded in 2020, and our mission is to electrify everything. So this is really working on changing people's homes to get off of fossil fuels and switch to electric machines, which I'm happy to talk more about in various ways. But we have a policy shop that works on changing this at the federal, state, and local level. We have CEOs and local government leaders coalitions. We build digital products to help connect people to incentives and different resources they can use to electrify their own homes. We have a massive communications and marketing machine to really change the game around how people think about climate and electrification work. And the work that I lead is really our work in communities. So Stacey Abrams joined our organization about a year ago, and we're starting to really translate all of our great knowledge into actual community work in various communities around the country. Right now, we're working in a number of different low and moderate income communities, including DeSoto, Georgia. We're working to electrify the entire town and really trying to figure out what are the barriers we need to overcome to really make electrification happen in all of the communities around the country. And in terms of my path here, so I kind of grew up with kind of an environmental things, I guess, coming down from my family. But when I got to college, I ended up doing a lot of environmental activism. So I spent a decent chunk of my time there chaining myself to various things, including, redwood trees out here in California to try to stop them from getting cut down. That was a really important part of my life, made some of my best friends in the world. But ultimately decided I needed to try to figure out a slightly more effective way to start kind of making the change happen. So I got into the world of green building, actually, thanks to kind of a guest speaker at one of my classes who was starting a new little startup around green building, and then ended up making my way through some careers in local government, affordable housing development, some energy consulting, a little bit of bicycle advocacy. So everything has had some element of climate stuff, but different kind of intersectional parts of it to try to satisfy my curiosity and see how to make all these things tie together. So that's my path.
Awesome, thank you. I wish we had a picture of one of those redwoods you were chained to.
Yeah, I had a lot more hair back then.
Kindia from dream.org, tell us about your work and also how you got got into this work as well.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Candia Milton. I am the Government Affairs Director for dream.org, where our mission statement is close prison doors and open up doors of opportunity to the green economy. And as that statement might imply, we do work on issues relative to, the over-incarceration, where we label it, our justice work. We work on issues around poverty, eradicating poverty and pollution, hence open up doors of opportunity into the green economy. And we do that in a way that is bipartisan, where we look to establish common grounds with who we often refer to as unlikely allies. What we recognize, in order for us to make this transition to clean energy, we must, in order for it to be sustainable, we must have bipartisan support. And so we do navigate the polarization that exists in our country in order to do that, to reach common ground. And we work at the federal, state, and local levels. What we recognize is that those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but so often don't have access to the center of power to do anything about the challenges that we face in our communities. And so we work with directly impacted individuals, both folks who are incarcerated, but also people who are living in communities that have been largely harmed by the injustices imposed on them due to the exploitation of our resources, our precious resources. And so we believe that the solution lie right within our communities. Again, these are people who we're suffering in our communities, and our voices need to be uplifted. And we believe that lifting not only up those voices, but building the power to change the conditions that we find ourselves in our respective communities are critical to our activism. And we bring the community to the corners of power to make change we want to see. How did I get into this work? Well, I got into it not recognizing, quite frankly, at the time that I was in it. I've been working at the intersection of policy and politics for the last 22 years now. Started off at the city of Detroit as the liaison to city council, and then was promoted to deputy chief of staff and then chief of staff for the city of Detroit. But one of the very first projects I worked on was getting funding from the federal government to open up the Next Energy Center right there on the campus of Wayne State in Detroit here. And it was more of a project as I saw it at the time, but it was in those moments that I became more aware of the opportunities, particularly for a Rust Belt city, to be a leader in the space of research and the different options for clean energy at the time. And so my first indoctrination into the intersection of policy and politics was getting funding from the federal government to even open up the center. And it was that eye-opening moment that really sparked my interest in clean energy. And that was back in 2003 that I was introduced to this work. And so I've been working at it at some level or another, whether it be through development projects and brownfield cleanups and getting tax abatements for those for such sites. And today I'm engaging the community in an efforts to make certain that there is greater awareness around the opportunities that exist as we make this transition.
Thanks so much. And Mark from GreenLatinos, tell us a little bit about your all's work and then how you got into this work.
Hola, Cristina. Buenos dias. Thanks for the invitation. And felicidades. Congratulations on your 10 years.
Thank you.
We 5 more years and you have your quinceañera. I'm excited to get the invitation.
Invito al baile.
I'll be the chambalan. We just, GreenLatinos, we just celebrated our quinceañera last September in DC and had the whole 9 yards, the cake and everything. So it was a blast. I'm Mark Magana, founding president, CEO of GreenLatinos. We are a nationwide comunidad of Latino, Latina, Latine, environmental, conservation, climate justice advocates. We come together across different sectors of the movement, Latinos who enter through mainstream big green groups, legacy groups, through frontline environmental justice, through the government sector, academia, foundations, corporate sustainability, renewable energy, public health. We come together to be able to break down historical barriers that exist between the movement and the different sectors. And we play three roles with our members. One, we're a convener. So we bring together our members both in person and virtually, national level, regional and local level. Some of our in-person events, I just referred to our quinceañera. We have an annual Green Latinos Week in DC and during Hispanic Heritage Month. And then we also have our Green Latinos National Summit, where we bring together 250 plus top Latino environmental leaders. And we're doing it in El Yunque, Puerto Rico, May 7th through 10th. So I invite all of you to join us there. It's going to be pretty amazing. Our convening power really leads to our members, feeling like I'm not alone in this work. There are other people that look like me and sound like me and that do similar work or in subject matter or in location. And also to be able to build trusted relationships that lead to partnerships where we can more efficiently and effectively share our unique resources, power, privilege, access, information that each of the sectors holds that the other sectors needs in order to succeed. And so the power of convening is the power for member to member relationship and resource sharing. The second thing we do is we serve as an intermediary where we directly direct and link our members to resources. You know, the sun and the moon has been promised to environmental justice over the last 7 years. And those resources from big green groups, foundations, have gone to EJ, but they've only gone to maybe the big 2 dozen EJs in the nation. And they do amazing work. But for every one of them, there's 100 comadres, a teacher, a priest trying to stop a methane peaker plant with no resources and no attention. So how do we play that intermediary role to link our members that aren't resourced yet to the resources out there, not just financial, but I need a fiscal sponsor. I need some government relations help, some comms help. I need some help with this federal government application or this grant application. So really elevating the work that's being done by the leaders that are already there doing the work. And then the third thing, when we elevate, when member to member elevation, when we are able to direct resources, more and more entities, organizations, efforts are resourced to do their work. And then they're ready to also do advocacy work on those issues. And so we're an advocacy coordinator, both being able to train on advocacy, coordinate fly-ins, access people to pull more seats up to the table, the powerful tables that are there, so that we have frontline EJ voices there. That kind of sums up what we do and our theory of action and how we change. We have a significant policy team, significant state teams, and are growing, really rapidly. My path, I was born in Chicago, raised in LA, got to DC right after college and worked in Latino civil rights organizations, worked on the Hill for Congress with a couple members, and then in congressional leadership as a senior floor advisor. And then I worked in the Clinton administration at HHS Legislative Affairs and as special assistant to President Clinton for White House Legislative Affairs. And those gave me a lot of background on the systems, on negotiating, on legislation, on policy, how the sausage is made. But I had never done environmental work. And in 2007, the movement was trying to move a cap and trade bill, Waxman-Markey. And they asked me to help build Latino support for the Waxman-Markey bill. And what I discovered in that process was that Latinos didn't feel like there was a hub for them, that they feel isolated, siloed in the work that they did. And so We eventually started GreenLatinos, which is that hub.
Mhm.
And like I said earlier, celebrated our quinceañera. And for me,
Congratulations.
the whole movement really kicked in for me when my daughter was born, and
Yeah.
knowing that this was going to be the biggest issue affecting her life.
Thank you, Mark. And last we have Aiden, and Aiden is part of earthday.org. And also, Aiden, I actually got into this work, and I'm not joking, like I became like, I consider myself becoming an environmentalist when I was 8 years old, and I went to my first ever Earth Day march and protest that was happening in Columbus, Ohio. And it was like, for me, it's when I started to really think about like the planet we inherit. So I know you weren't part of that because you look a little too young, but thank you to your organization and movement for helping educate me when I was really young. But tell us a little bit about what you do and also how you came to this work.
Yeah, I am not 54 years old. It's 54 years old. I am not, but I'm
You look amazing if you're 54. You look
I know
amazing.
it's a moisturizing routine I do every night, morning and afternoon. But I'm Aiden Sharon. I'm the director of End Plastic Initiative at earthday.org. We try to work at every level, so both local, national, and international, but we try to listen to those most affected by the triple planetary crisis and push for change everywhere we go. Currently, I'm in Ottawa, Canada, representing Earth Day at the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee 4. It's a really long name, basically just to say I'm here to help negotiate a treaty to fight plastic pollution and plastic production. EarthDay.org's mission is diversify, educate, and activate the environmental movement worldwide. And a lot of time, like you were saying, it's people's first introduction into the environmental field. Our world needs a transformational change. The only way we're going to do it is to activate and motivate and educate civil society as well as just the general public. I got into this work. I've been at Earth Day for almost 2 years now, but I kind of grew quickly into the environmental movement. I grew up on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, living near the beach, worked for a restaurant. I took it a little bit different path than a lot of environmentalists. I thought about it from a money perspective because my parents are restaurant owners, and then moved away from that as I got older and kind of became more educated on the subjects. But I went to college for biology and geographic information systems. That's just to say I looked at satellites a lot and had to do mapping in the middle of nowhere. During college, I worked as an educator at the Pine Knoll Shores Aquarium, doing the underwater scuba stuff, doing education underwater, and doing plastic education as well as climate change education. After college, I jumped into wetland reclamation for a couple of years, and then I was a teacher briefly in DC before jumping into Earth Day as part of the climate education team. So I jumped into Earth Day and the climate education team, realized that plastic was a little bit more interesting to me, so jumped into there and was still able to educate people while becoming a part of Earth Day.
Awesome. Well, I actually, before we jump in and talk about some of the really exciting things that have been happening, like the Inflation Reduction Act, I actually just want to ask everybody, like in 30 seconds, I once had to do a public debate where answers had to be 30 seconds. It was really tough, but 30 seconds about what's giving you hope, because so much of what we look at and talk about in the climate crisis can feel overwhelming, or people don't actually know that they should be hopeful. So, and I would love to start with Rahul, because I think especially Rewiring America has been really good about thinking like, how does tackling the climate crisis make our life better? So what gives you hope in this moment?
Yeah, so many things. I've never been more hopeful about the climate change issue than I am today. And I think the two main sources of that are, one, the price of electricity, or the price of generating renewable electricity is dropping faster than anybody would have ever predicted, and we continue to kind of outstrip the projections there too. So that opens up a world of abundance, which we can talk about in different ways, to really move the technologies forward and make people's lives better while actually doing the right thing for the climate. And as a result of that, a ton of money, both from the private sector and from the federal government, is coming into this space to spur along innovation and generate jobs for everyone.
Great. Good 30 seconds. All right. Mark?
What gives me hope are the youth, and that's not just, playing to the crowd here. Latinos represent 18% of the population, but we represent 27% of those under 18. That's a huge amount and growing. And the youth of this generation don't know what they're not supposed to do. They don't know what they're not supposed to lead on. They take things on, the dreamers, didn't wait for the national groups to take on the DREAM Act. They said, we're doing it ourselves. All these issues we're seeing these days that are really moving are because the youth just take it on themselves and really lead us and bring us forward. It's not saying everything's on their shoulders. We're there, but we're really taking a lot of their lead, and they give me hope.
Kindia?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think I could probably sum it up in just a word, and that is opportunity. I think that, our opportunity to one, educate, but also educate in a way that people get it. This is very technical stuff. And I think, a lot of folks, as I'm talking to people in the community, when we're having these conversations, excuse the pun, but a light bulb goes off. And when folks start to see the opportunities that exist within this transition, there's great excitement around it.
Awesome. Aiden?
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is, we're seeing the most amount of climate action we have in recent years, as well as just the most amount of environmental policies rolling out. And it's just, I've been going to these meetings to combat the plastic crisis, and just what gives me hope is that it's every walk of life is coming together to do and fight for climate, justice, as well as just fight for environmental justice. And it's also, I get the least amount of grief that I've ever gotten from people when I talk to them about environmental issues. I'm from a conservative town in North Carolina. I know that's not very surprising, but when I talk to people, they're more willing to listen than ever before. 10 years ago, I was doing protests outside of my high school and doing protests, in my local community, and we got a lot more crap at them than we do now. So that's what's giving me hope, is people are just more willing to listen.
Yeah, I think just to add what gives me hope, I think I'm a little bit like Rahul in that I cared so much about the environment and social justice issues that when I was younger, I was like the oddball out, right? Like the things I cared about, how I tried to live my life, people were like, didn't think about it. They thought it was weird. And they thought I was overly worried. And now the things that were, kind of odd or abnormal then are now the center of American public policy. And everyone's talking about it, and everyone realizes the issue. Not everyone, but nearly everybody, except the folks that work for big oil and gas that are making lots of money and want to hide the actual consequences of climate change. Generally, people around the globe have realized, and they're also realizing like those things that seemed really outside of the norm, that they can actually make our lives better. And the other thing that gives me hope is that we're not just talking about the environment, we're talking about workers' rights, we're talking about racial justice, we're talking about how we make our society better for everyone. And that's really, really exciting and gives me a lot of hope, because I come from the labor movement, I come from the immigrants' rights movement, I come from the racial justice movement, and to see all of those movements come together to address inequities and tackle the climate crisis at the same time is just like such a beautiful, beautiful moment and movement to be a part of. So I wanted to ask everyone about, we just announced the Climate Corps, got announced yesterday. So I just want to ask if only one person can explain, I don't know who wants to jump in, what the Climate Corps is, how people can apply, and why it might be a good place to get a start for a career. And then I'd love to jump in and talk a little bit more about the Inflation Reduction Act. So I throw it out there to any one person that wants to take that on. If not, I'm going to call on somebody. I'm going to call on Aiden and Rahul.
I am honestly not super familiar with the Climate Corps.
Okay, then Rahul, we can go to, and nobody is yet because they just announced yesterday. But yes.
I also won't claim to be an expert, but happy to talk a little bit about it. I mean, Climate Corps is a great initiative of the Biden administration to really try to make sure that youth have an opportunity early in their careers to make their way into the world of climate change. And so, obviously we're going to learn a lot about this over the next few months as folks try to think through what are the types of opportunities that are out there. But the goal here is to say, if you're early in your career, you don't know which version of this makes sense for you, but you just want to get this in the world and you want this to be the focus of the first steps of your career, that there's going to be a ton of different opportunities that you can apply to and be able to think through and know that this can be a path, an easy path for people to start coming, straight out of school to figure out what their first step of their career can look like. But happy to hear from other folks if they have more details to share too.
All I can say, Christine, is I received the announcement with all the links, and first thing I did was I forwarded it to my daughters and told them to sign up. So they don't usually listen to me, but I certainly hope that they see this as a great opportunity to engage in the work.
Yeah, I'll say this would have been my probably first job if I was like 20 years old. This would have been like my first job I would have ever applied for because I cared about the world. And the real wave of the future is already here, and even more so will be clean energy jobs. So this is a great way to get a foothold in skills and make a good living while you're learning and starting out your career. So folks can also learn more at ignitethefuture.org, which is NextGen's kind of hub for jobs, career plans. As more information comes out, we'll also have links there, as well as I'm sure everybody's page here. So I want to talk really quickly about the Inflation Reduction Act. When people learn about it and what's in it, they get really excited and they're really supportive of it, especially young Americans. But a lot of people don't actually know what it is. So I wanted to start with Candia to really break down, when you talk to young folks, like young Black folks that you work with, how do you explain the Inflation Reduction Act, why they should care, how it benefits them?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And so I do start with talking about that big number, right? The Inflation Reduction Act and the amount the investment is. And I think that's what initially gets folks' attention. It's the $369 billion in investment in clean energy and the transition to clean energy. And I really talk about it in the context of this is an opportunity for climate equity. And only if you bring your voices to the table can we make certain that those investments are made in Black and brown communities. And so we spend a lot of time spelling out what that can look like in respective communities, and making certain that as we talk about it, there is a vision that's created for what clean energy projects can look like in our communities. So often when these investments come, there's others who are deciding what development activity can look like in communities, and doesn't always have our best interest at heart. And so we're making certain that we're hearing from the communities, identifying specific projects, getting those projects shovel ready, but then helping them understand what the access points are. By one, educating them on, what is this greenhouse gas reduction fund and how can we utilize it as a tool? What is direct pay? And what does that mean to investment in clean energy? When I go to buy a car now, what's this tax credit? And do I have to do it on my taxes, or is there immediate benefit that I can get from that tax credit by selling it? And what is, so sort of educating the community on what these tools are. But also when you go in a lot of communities and you just say Justice 40, right? So we talk about education. Folks are lost, right? They think it's when you say justice, they think it's criminal justice reform type of issue. And so spelling out what Justice 40 is, and the importance of engaging and making certain that those resources come into are directed to our communities. And what Biden means when he says Justice 40, right? 40% of investments are directed toward disadvantaged communities. I don't particularly like the word disadvantaged, so I always say underestimated or forgotten communities. And so really helping them to define, helping them understand what these terms are and how to access the opportunities that exist.
Aiden, how would you describe for young people what the Inflation Reduction Act is, how people should care, or how they can benefit?
Yeah, I guess the way I've explained it in the past is that it's basically just an investment into combating the climate crisis. That's been the most palatable thing to say to people, especially in the environmental movement. So it's reducing our costs on upgrades to more renewables, reducing our costs to more energy efficient takeovers of our house, and also allows for more businesses to invest. So it gives a little bit of a kickback to those businesses that want to invest to be more climate friendly. It also has been somewhat beneficial in advancing environmental justice by working with communities of color to kind of work on mitigating the crisis there. They are the ones most affected by it. And then the one that people really like is that it's cutting energy costs down. So it's making it cheaper to live, and it's just making it easier to live off of what should be a much higher average wage in this country.
Rahul, you guys have spent a lot of time and energy just like breaking it down for politicians, for the average consumer, average American. How do you all break it down for folks?
Sure. Yeah. When we talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, we really are talking about two things. We're talking about creating great jobs for people, and we're talking about putting money back in folks' pockets throughout America. So on the creating jobs side, our friends at Climate Power did an analysis and saw that over 200,000 jobs were created in the first year of the Inflation Reduction Act. And these are good paying jobs in the clean energy economy. And we expect that to go exponential over the next few years as there's more time for the different aspects of the IRA to kick in. So if you're out there wondering, is this a good career path for me? Is this going to be a good long-term job for me? The answer is yes, it is. There's so many great resources flowing into this, creating great jobs. So that's the first thing to start with. The second thing, again, is really putting money back in folks' pockets. So there's a lot of different things that contribute to this. The part we're focused on is really talking about how to electrify people's homes. So if you're talking about how to switch from a gas furnace to a heat pump, or a gas stove to an induction stove, these things that you want to do for the climate, to reduce your energy bills, to make your home healthier for your folks, you can do that. That's the right thing to do for lots of reasons, but the IRA is going to make it easier for you. For those who do have taxable income, there are tax credits, but for lower and moderate income folks, there are also rebates as well that are kicking in state by state this year. So you can learn a lot more about these things on the electrification side at homes.rewiringamerica.org. We have a
Say it again. What is it? Say it again slow.
Sorry, homes.rewiringamerica.org. And in the top right corner, you'll see a couple links, including a planner that we have where you can start to think through what this means for you, and then get a full set of understanding what the different tax credits and incentives are that are available to your home that might be applicable to you, your family, your friends, and your neighbors.
And Mark, how do you all break it down and describe it for folks?
I think it's been described very well. Top lines, the $360+ billion in opportunity, the Justice 40 metric and what that provides for our communities. I think the only thing I would add, especially when it comes to young people, is letting them know that they're coming in right at the entry point of this green economic revolution. They may have missed the Industrial Revolution or the birth of the internet, or the advantage of taking Bitcoin when it was pennies on the dollar, but they are there for this moment of massive investment in the green economy revolution. And so to be able to make sure that they educate themselves, to know what's out there. I mean, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund just came out with $27 billion. And just to make sure that, the Latino community is well represented in the green energy and in the fossil fuel industry, but to be able to get educated, to be able to take advantage of this opportunity and this moment. We organized the largest Latino groups in the country to put together something called Colaborativo 40, so that we would be able to educate each other and share and collaborate on Justice 40 opportunities. This stuff isn't easy. To be a federal government applicant is not easy, but to not take advantage of it, to miss the boat, is even harder and worse for our community. So really showing them where they are in the history and showing them what the potential is.
Yeah, I think what's so exciting about the Inflation Reduction Act, you can say the number of how much money it is, and it's still hard to comprehend just how big it is and what it means. It is literally transforming American jobs, home energy in our homes, changing industrial sectors, and really incentivizing people to participate and benefit as businesses, individuals, in the new clean energy economy. And I'm just going to give a quick example about how it's transformed my life. Last year, my car was totaled. Someone ran into me. I needed a new car. And I was like, I'm going to look and see if I can really benefit from the Inflation Reduction Act. I got myself a Chevy Bolt, 100% clean energy car, union made, proud to be part of the supporting United Auto Workers, one of my favorite unions. Union made, good clean jobs. And I also ended up getting solar panels on my little 1,200 square foot mansion I live in. And I charge my car, clean energy, 100% at my house. I don't pay to go to the gas station anymore. I'm saving money. I don't even have to take the car to get an oil change. Like, y'all, it has saved me so much time. And I honestly, if you haven't driven one, like, go drive one. They're so fun to drive. I feel like if you ever were Yoshi in Mario Kart, that's how I feel I am. It just like zips and zooms and it like doesn't make any noise. It's so fun to drive. Any friend that I've had drive it has been like, I want one. So, and in my car, I got $7,500 off my car. So it was a $20,000 new clean energy car. Like, that's amazing, right? And with my rebates on my solar panels, I'm paying as much as I was paying in my utility bill with a loan, and I'm going to have it all paid off. And it was an asset on my house. So like, that's just one very simple example. And now I have my neighbors walking by and be like, how'd you get those? I want those, right? So it's really cool to see how it's transformed my own life and my own home and feel like I'm part of this clean energy future. So speaking about, I mentioned, the United Auto Workers. A lot of people don't realize that the Inflation Reduction Act is also a clean energy jobs plan, right? You mentioned, Rahul, 200,000 jobs started. So I only want to ask a couple of folks. So I wanted to start actually with Candia, who spent a lot of time with public policy, right? Like, how is this actually a jobs program, especially like as we transition? How does it create good job opportunities for everybody?
Yeah, so I think as I mentioned before, it starts, Christina, with, I believe, the education around the opportunities that exist, but it also is the training. If you take a look at Black and brown communities, we're often entrepreneurs in the construction field, right? And so now there's an opportunity to retool those skills, to now, if you're an electrician, to install solar panels, if you're a roofer, installing solar panels, technicians for wind turbines, and how do we train folks for those jobs, installing EV charging stations, and training folks for those jobs. And we often talk about those technical jobs, but then as we take a look at the heat islands in our communities, now we're talking about landscaping jobs and landscape architecture. And so there's a whole, host of jobs, innovation in that space. I mean, if we're going to make this transition, I think it's, over 20 million jobs by 2030 is are the numbers that are being projected. It's going to require some innovation in that space. And so, opportunities to be innovative. I mean, we're creative, Black and brown people are creative people. And so seeing opportunities for innovation within that space. And so there's just, I think the possibilities and opportunities are endless.
Rahul, I know you guys have also thought a lot about clean jobs for the future and how this is a jobs program. And that's also a lot about what you all talk about and think about. So can you explain that to folks? Like, how is this actually a jobs program?
Sure. There's so many different ways. One thing I'll focus in, again, in our world of electrification, by creating all these incentives, we're generating demand. So more and more people want to make these switches for the equipment in their homes. To be able to do that, you need the folks to be able to install the work. So we calculate that to do what's going to be needed between now and 2050, we're going to need 1 million new electricians over the next couple of years just to do the electrical work. So we're talking about, again, good paying jobs, doesn't require a 4-year college degree. It's a great career path. These can be kind of 6-figure salary jobs earlier in your career.
See that electrician at a 6-figure career path, right? And
absolutely.
And there's a deficit. So if you apply and you're working in this career, you probably have like some long-term job security, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's only going to grow more and more as time goes on. And yeah, and there is a deficit right now. So this is a great, stable job too. And I think one of the great things about the Inflation Reduction Act is that there are significant workforce protections as well. So again, really trying to kind of strengthen union labor as well, so that as we generate all these jobs, we also feel like there is the long-term security as part of the labor movement also.
So one thing I want to explain for folks that don't understand just really quickly. For the Inflation Reduction Act, also what was built in that was really cool is not just like, oh, we want electric cars, right? But that there are incentives for more American-made products in the supply chain of that car. So it's like it really thought about how to shift the economy and what we use from the entire industry supply chain. And so that's really cool to see that both from the technology and the materials, we're thinking about how the administration really thought about, okay, if we're going to put billions of dollars into investment, how are we actually creating good American and hopefully union paid jobs as well? Because we all know that the only thing that ever built the middle class were unions, right, in this country. So I wanted to ask, the other thing that's really cool about the Inflation Reduction Act and just how we're talking about the climate crisis, and everyone said it already, but I'd love to start with Mark and Aiden a little bit about this, is understanding how climate change impacts Black and Brown communities most. You all said that, but like explain that to folks, how that actually is in reality, and then what can be done to, what's being done. If you can also point to anything in particular that like one project you've seen anywhere in the country that you're really excited about that gives you hope. And I'd love to start with you, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen historically Black and Brown communities being subjugated to intensive pollution from multi-sources. That's on purpose. That was planned. It wasn't accidental. I grew up in Los Angeles in the 1970s. I lived within a mile of the 405, the 605, and the 22 freeway. Before we went out in the morning and went out and played, we had to make sure our friends had their inhalers for asthma. We knew we had to take an inhaler break while we played. It was how we lived. These are communities that have been subjugated to being sacrifice zones, to being disposable. We see that today with farm workers and construction workers, where they're making, in certain states, they're making water breaks illegal. They're trying to say a city can't institute more water breaks for these workers, where in Phoenix you have 110 plus degree weather for 30 days in a row. These are our disposable communities. And so being on the front lines of climate emergencies, being on toxic waste sites of industry, poor air quality, poor access to outdoors and green spaces, where we're not located within walking distance of a beautiful green space or have the treescape to be able to enjoy the health benefits of green space has been massive. And so being able to overcome that, being able to fight with environmental justice purposes to be able to see our communities achieve their environmental liberation is what we're about.
Aiden, and then I'd also love to hear from Candia if he has a specific project he's seen in the works in the country that really gives you that you think is a really good model for folks to follow that addresses the climate crisis and racial justice as well.
So yeah, I mean, climate change affects Black and Brown communities the most just because of the systemic racism we have in this country, and just we haven't gotten rid of racism. I hear that a lot from some of my hometown people that I see every once in a while, but we haven't gotten rid of it. And this country's just put Black and Brown communities on the chopping block. We have Cancer Alley down in Louisiana where the most amount of plastic production is coming from. They're the ones with the highest healthcare costs, but they're the ones that can least afford it. And the government up until this point has done very little to help these communities out, cutting those healthcare costs. The IRA is helping a little bit, but there still needs to be more investment. We're also seeing that a lot of these communities all over the world actually are doing informal waste picking, and they're being exposed to the climate change. Both they're being forced to stay outside to clean up our mess, and they're not able to afford any sort of health care following that, and they're most exposed to the environmental effects. You also have less investment in infrastructure in these communities, and in 2023 we saw the most amount of climate disasters in the United States ever at 28, an uptick from 2022, and that is $90 billion that is a burden on our country, and it's most affecting Black and Brown communities. I say that as a very privileged white male, so I'll pass that on to the next panelist.
Candia, I'm wondering for you if you've seen anything that really like stands out for you, or how a community has organized to address some of these issues.
Yeah, this is very intriguing. I think much of what was defined as the problem in response is certainly something I would agree with. I mean, we're looking at within these black and brown communities, disparities relative to health, economic disparities, educational disparities, criminal justice disparities, these combined disparities, access to healthcare, and all of it. When you take a look at the environment and the impact, it's certainly taken its toll on black and brown communities. In Detroit, that they built the freeway right through a community, thus increasing the pollution. Back in the 50s in the respective communities. But I will state that there's been some hope. In I'll just use Detroit as an example. Much of Detroit's riverfront was built to handle industry in the growth of the city of Detroit. But I can tell you, back in the early 2000s, when a lot of that industry was closed down and abandoned, the city of Detroit raised money, both philanthropic dollars as well as federal dollars, to transition that riverfront from heavy industry to a walkable and accessible riverfront. And so it removed a lot of the buildings that were on the riverfront, the cement silo production that was happening on Detroit's riverfront, and created green spaces along the river, created walkable pathways for 6 miles from the Ambassador Bridge all the way over to what would be Detroit's Central Park, if you would, Belle Isle. And so it was it's walkable now for 6 miles. A lot of green space, permeable space, as well as bringing in indigenous plants into the area. And so we see some hope and some recognition by the philanthropic community and government at times, and we should be able to use that model the city, but throughout the country.
Rahul, I know you all have been tracking these projects as well. I'm wondering if you have any examples you could point to.
Sure. Well, first of all, at a high level, I think, in addition to what Mark and Candia were talking about, the air quality impacts on Black and brown communities, what we're seeing, the science is showing more and more that what accelerates the negative impacts of that is actually the air quality inside of your home too. So studies are starting to show that childhood asthma rates increase by 40% if you have a gas stove in your house. And so that, again, disproportionately affects Black and brown communities, because they're getting those outdoor air quality impacts as well as indoor air quality impacts that converges into kind of real health impacts for families there too. So while we're working on changing the outdoors, we need to work on changing the indoors too. And one specific example, so we're doing work in DeSoto, Georgia, which is a rural community 3 hours south of Atlanta. And folks there are pretty honest about the fact that they feel pretty left behind by the country and the state, and they haven't gotten any real resources for a long time. So we're working to electrify that entire town of around 100 homes. And while we were starting to survey folks and figure out the order of events, we talked to a woman named Miss Carter, who's now in the pages of the New York Times as of a couple weeks ago as our first electrification project on the ground in DeSoto. And what we found there is that we were hoping to, make the right climate decision and help her get better technology. And the reality was, she hadn't had water for 6 months. Her water heater broke 6 months ago. She didn't have the money to replace it, and she couldn't get a contractor to make the 90-minute drive out to DeSoto to do it. So we helped provide the resources, and we helped get the contractor out there with the promise that there'd be 100 more projects coming, thanks to the resources coming from the Inflation Reduction Act. So, Ms. Carter would be the first to tell you she's not doing this for climate reasons. She's doing it because she wants a better quality of life for her home. And that's the point for all of this work, is to say, of course, we want to do the right thing for the climate, but we just want to make people's lives better who deserve resources and haven't had it for decades.
I love that. So I know we're coming close to time, so I'd love just in like a minute or so for, what's your advice for young people that are looking to make a difference on this issue, or even set their own career path to be part of tackling the biggest crisis of our time, the climate crisis? And I'd love to start with our most well moisturized panelist, Aiden, who looks so young. Aiden, break it down. What do you think?
I think the best thing you can do is just, remain educated on what the most prevalent, climate crises are, part of the triple planetary crisis, and then just go to these job boards that everybody else has mentioned and just kind of stay up to date on where the markets are going to be shifting to. We're moving away from fossil fuels in this country, which is fantastic. So start looking at jobs outside of those oil wells and outside of those oil fields. Look into more jobs that don't require a degree. I think Rahul mentioned that electricians are making six-figure salaries. I was never told that in school. So look away from traditional career paths. College isn't for everybody, and it's okay to say that. Community college, trade schools, they're completely necessary to keep this country moving, and they pay really well, and it doesn't make you any dumber at all. It's just a different set of skills. I can't be a plumber. I can't do anything working with electricity. So I'm thankful that we have those trade schools and everything. I'm just here to kind of push the education messaging about climate and just hope that people much smarter and much more capable can move it forward.
Candia, what's your advice?
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember not long ago, I was a youth. I know these gray hairs would not be a real indicator of that, but not long ago.
I have a few too. Don't worry, my wife points them out every day.
I was sitting in their seats, and I remember, being in discussions with folk, and they're, them telling me that we're the future leaders of this country, and it seemed daunting at the time. But I will state today, and I want to state today, as was stated to me. In fact, I'm going to state it differently. I don't think you're the future. I think you're the now. And embrace the fact that you are leaders in this country, and engage the movement right where you are in your own cities. Bring awareness. I mean, you participated in this panel discussion, and it's one thing to be more educated, but now let's use the information that you have and use the resources and the people that you have met today, and use that to activate within your own communities. And so you don't have to start big. You can start real small right there in your hometown, on your block, and build from there.
Awesome. Mark, and then we'll end with Rahul.
Yeah, I would say it's do big things. Don't get caught up in the little things. Don't get caught up in your to-do list, your email zero. Don't get caught up in all the things that are pulling you. Imagine big. Do big things with your life. We don't have the time to be able to think small and get caught up in just being busy and thinking we're being productive. The big things are important. We're in a documentary moment where our kids, the future generations, are going to say, what the hell did you do when you had a chance? And so if we don't have the best answer for them, they're going to be very disappointed in us. And so being able to tackle the big things, the things that take a year, 2 years, 5 years to really get under, projects that you feel are going to make move the needle. That's what I want the young people to really think of, and not get stuck on the small things in life.
Rahul?
Two pieces of advice. One, the great thing that's changed since I was looking for a job out of college is that, back then, if you wanted to work in the environmental world, you had to find an environmental job. Now the movement's grown so much, we need everyone. So we need teachers and accountants and electricians, plumbers, find your passion, whatever this the kind of work that you want to do. There's a way to kind of have that be part of the climate movement, because we need everyone to come together on that. So find your passion. But that said, if your passion is electrification, we're hiring and we're going to be doubling in size over the next year. So you can always go to rewiringamerica.org and click on
right there with Rewiring America.
Absolutely. The second thing I'll say is you got to find a way to kind of find the balance and joy so that you can sustain your career too. The reality is, like, for all the joy and optimism we have, there are times that are hard in any job, but especially in the climate world. There's times where it can feel overwhelming and disheartening. So you have to figure out what's going to be the joy that sustains you. And some of that will be in your work. Some of that will be outside of your work. So finding a way to find that balance, whatever the thing is, whether it's getting into the mountains or jumping in a lake or just dancing to good music, whatever it is, you're going to need that to be able to keep fighting the good fight, so that this is a decades-long career for you, and you can help us really get to where we need to get for the climate movement.
Yeah, I think for me, for my last piece of advice, and then just to give a plug for an upcoming event where people can hear about different job opportunities that we're also doing in partnership with Rewiring America and a few others. But I think there are so many jobs that are clean energy jobs. And we're in a moment where young people are saying, I don't want to just go to a job. I want to have a job where I have a purpose, where I feel proud of what I do every day. And you can now, yes, you can be an electrician. You can be a lender. Like, people are trying to figure out how to lend money to clean energy jobs. You can be a school teacher teaching young people about the climate crisis. We also are in a moment of massive invention, right? Like, Aiden works on ending plastic. Well, what are we going to use to substitute plastic? Like, there's all of these cool things that people are coming out with that then become the runway and the testing ground for how we reimagine everything we use in our world around us. Like, that's a very exciting opportunity for entrepreneurs, for workers. And these jobs, a lot of them pay a lot more. So this is a really, really exciting time to be part of thinking about what you get to do in your life, and the purpose you get to have with it. And so for that, I want to remind folks that we have a workshop upcoming May 7th. It's at 12 Eastern. It's a workshop on job opportunities, professional development, and job opportunities that we're doing with some of the folks here. And so come learn more about the different jobs that you could be doing. There is just so many possibilities right now. And I want to thank everyone. As Rahul said, so this work can be hard, right? Like, all work can be hard, but it's really rewarding. And it's really rewarding to get to connect with folks that have given their own lives to this work and had it not only nourish yourselves and your soul, but also no one person tackles an issue this big. It takes a movement, and it's really great to be working in partnership with you all to tackle it together. And so I send you all happy Earth Day hugs, and to everyone watching as well. And also go to ignitethefuture.org to learn more, and also get some cool swag that we have about how we can tackle the climate crisis and build a better world for all of us, for workers, people, the planet. Take care, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina.